And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Big League Show. My name, as always, is Connor Somerville, and I'm joined by Aiden Silifet. Aiden, how are you doing today?
Doing good, Connor. How are you doing?
I'm good. Excited to have someone who I really respect in our program, someone who's put a lot of work into doing stuff outside of the program, who's put a lot of work into his own projects, and someone who I think in our program is probably the most likely to get a job coming out of university.
Wow.
So, Drew Frank,
Nice.
welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, that's quite an intro. I'm hoping I can live up to that. But no, thank you. Appreciate it. And happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. So I guess we'll start off with a bit about you as your video freezes. How did you find out about the program and sort of what made you fall in love with sport media?
I kind of chose it as a bit of a gamble because I was in this high school program where it was like very academic focused. My class went into either engineering or medicine because you took all the maths, all the sciences. And coming out of high school, all I really realized was that I don't like this and I don't want to be doing this for a career. So I applied to a couple schools for stats to try and work my way into like a baseball front office. Because I realized like I want to be working in sports. But Ryerson was the only communications or the only media school I applied to because it was, very different, sport focused, and everything online about it looked cool, like looked interesting. But went in with zero experience in media. Not like Jackson and Zach talked about doing the Ridge TV and that kind of background. Like I have none of that. Kind of went in blind, but it's worked out so far.
Yeah, that's good to hear. You touched on that baseball, statistics, and you wanted to be in the front office. That's a pretty different career, I guess. Do you think baseball was a big influence in you wanting to join sport media? Because if you guys don't know Drew is probably one of the biggest baseball fanatics I've ever known. Probably the biggest baseball fanatic in our program for sure. So do you think baseball was, a big factor into your decision to join sport media?
Yeah, I'd say for sure. I kind of I played baseball for I think 8 or 9 years. Seven of them were rep, but at the very lowest level of rep, like the absolute lowest level in Ontario. It goes triple A, double A, single A, and then I was way down in B, which just the lowest level. So nothing impressive, but it was kind of always consistent. And I went through 7 concussions, so a bunch of health problems. And then I was in this high school program that I wasn't really loving too much. And it just came down to baseball and sports were the one thing that were throughout it all was kind of the best part of everything. So that pretty much directly led me to Ryerson and to sport media.
Wait, 7 concussions. Let's just go back a little bit.
Yeah.
How did that happen? What's the story behind that?
Most of them are kind of boring stories. Like the first one was just grade 8 basketball out at recess. There was I thought I was trying to block a shot. They were trying to pass it across the key, so it went right into my forehead. Kind of not the most interesting. Another one was an elbow playing football, just bad luck. But the worst one was actually when I was playing baseball. Seth Nevsky on my team, Thomas West on my team. We're playing Richmond Hill. And then this kid's on my own team struck out to end the game with the bases loaded, wasn't happy, spiked his batting helmet into the ground, bounced up off of a metal pole, and knocked me out for 45 minutes.
What?
God,
so
what?
just kind of like fluky bad
minutes?
luck. Yeah, it was scary.
Jeez,
I didn't even know that was
my
possible.
God.
Yeah.
What?
45 minutes, wow.
How long were you out for after that?
That was when I decided, okay, we're done trying to play baseball. We're done trying to play sports, and kind of transitioned to thinking okay, well, can I make a career out of this doing something else? Another big reason that, led me to the program. But yeah, it was in the hospital overnight, full dark room treatment. But at that point, that was concussion number 5. So I was kind of comfortable with the process and knew what to do. dark rooms, no screens, the super boring, awful stuff about it. But bounce back, no lasting effects or anything, luckily, somehow.
So you're
And you
good now. You haven't felt anything
No,
since
luckily
then.
been okay since.
Okay.
somehow he still had 2 after that, which is nuts.
Yeah.
But let's tie it back to Ryerson, because you mentioned that this was not your, I guess, first choice. Maybe, is that a good way to put it? School, it was sort of like let's try media. What was the application like for it? Because I assume you came in here pretty casual. You weren't really stressed about applying, given it being not one of your main choices.
Well, no, I would say I was stressed because I didn't have anything I could point to as experience, right? Because I kind of based my proposal as saying, okay, I can write well, and kind of came in like saying, I think I did pretty well in the essay, and then in the interview, there's the face to face, and then there's the written part. And I felt like I did pretty well in the written part, but when it got to the interview, like I was talking to Thomas in the pre-waiting room before you go into the interview, and he was saying like he did PA for his high school, he'd called games already, he had experience, he was applying to all these communication schools, and I was like, well, I've got nothing, buddy. It was kind of lucky that I got in without, a lot of people had Rogers TV or like calling games, even at like university level games, like people had experience. So I was kind of just hoping that my writing would be able to carry me, I guess is the best way to put it.
Well, you're not alone in this. I had absolutely no media experience either. So if you are looking to get into Ryerson and don't have any media experience, still apply. Like, it's not
Well,
an issue.
now I think it's just all about the marks, right?
Especially
it's not
now.
even you don't have to go for an interview anymore. So if you got good grades and you want to be in sport media, I think you're set.
Go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Who did you have for your interview? We like hearing about this and sort of what the interview was like for people.
So I had Dan Berlin, and it was that probably just compounded the pressure I was feeling, because if listeners aren't familiar with Dan Berlin, he does TV, he's been in media, he's a producer, he's a lecturer, and he's a really captivating lecturer because he always talks with very poignant pauses, and he'll collect himself and really take things slow things down, deliver his point. But when I was in there freaking out, not knowing what was going on, the pauses and every like delay, I was thinking, oh, is this it? Is this the end? And I was like, oh man, I don't know. I mean, overall, it's a big plus, especially as a prof. Like, he makes it clear, but like when you're in there one-on-one, and I was already freaking out, I mean, it only kind of made things worse.
So how do you think the interview went for you?
I'm not sure if you guys can relate to this. I kind of thought I wasn't going to get in. I don't know if you guys felt the same way. I didn't think it went too well because we did the list of questions and I was out in like 9 minutes or something, when I think they said like max was 15. And then talked to Thomas afterwards, who also ended up getting in. And he said that he wasn't even talking about the questions. They're talking about sailing. They're talking about the Olympics. I was like, oh man, I mean, if he just ran through the questions, that mean nothing jumped out, or I didn't do it right, or I wasn't having the conversation. And I was thinking, it was pretty slim chance that I'd get in.
I guess it just depends on like who you had as well. Cause from what you're describing about Thomas's interview, he might've had Joe Recupero, maybe.
Yeah, I think he did.
Yeah, so I think, I also had him, and it was a bit more conversation based as well. But I think, just having an interview with Dan, who is a professor, who's one of, our professors for multiple classes, I think just having him definitely gave you a good chance, because he can get to know you and what he can tell what you would be like in his classes, I guess, too. So I guess, yeah, I guess I think we all were a little bit nervous coming out of the interviews, but it's a cool point on it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to hear your take on it as someone who sort of came into the program without any real media experience apart from your writing. Let's dive into a bit on your relationship with Thomas and other people in the program? Because you mentioned that you were friends with Thomas coming in the program. So what did that sort of do for you in your first couple weeks, couple months, initially coming into the program? How beneficial or I guess negative, is that a positive, good way of saying it, was the interaction and relationship building and gaining experience in the program?
I'd say it was a positive. Like we played baseball for 2 years together, center fielder and left fielder. So like kind of had a bit of camaraderie from that, and then we
Playing
ended up
catch together, in the
yeah,
outfield,
warming
warming
up
up.
before the
Yeah.
game, all of that stuff. We ended up being roommates for both first year and second year. But when we went to classes, like it was almost kind of like everyone's in the same boat, where like everyone may have known one person or two people, but probably not many people else. So it wasn't necessary to know someone, I would say. Especially, I mean, it's just a bunch of sports nerds, right? Like everyone wants to talk sports. Everyone's got the same shared interests for the most part. So not necessary, I would say, to have someone you're coming in with, because it's easy to find, especially if you're a hockey fan, easy to find people to talk about Leafs and talk about Raptors and do all that. But no, it's been good, and it's always helpful to have someone you can bounce ideas off and stuff like that.
So yeah, what have you enjoyed about the program so far? Is it, the opportunities that we get outside of the classroom, like, you're big on Rams Live, or maybe is it, Spirit Live, or is it a class? Is it a lab that you've enjoyed? What have you enjoyed about the program so far?
My favorite is the live control room stuff. So Rams Live, multicam, doing live sports is, I think, what I want to try and get a career in eventually, because I find like when it's live and it's happening and you're kind of reacting on the fly is like the most fun, most engaging part out of anything that we do, I would say, for sure. Rams Live is great. It's an awesome opportunity. I mean, it's one of the reasons that for second year, I opted to stay downtown again, because I'm from Caledon, which I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with where that is.
It's
How about you
like
just
up north, right?
yeah.
Somewhere closer up north.
Yeah, it's not far up north. It's just past Vaughan, kind of
Okay.
between Vaughan and Brampton-ish, northwest of Toronto. So I could
How
drive in like an hour plus if traffic's decent. But opted to stay downtown to get chances like Rams Live and what we ended up doing with baseball for the baseball team, and staying in RCC 229 on those Mac or Alienware computers till like 3 a.m. and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, let's dive into that, because what you did with the Ryerson baseball, I think, was really cool. It was something that hadn't been done before in sport media or at Ryerson in general. So for those of you who aren't aware, I'll let Drew go into it in a bit more detail. But basically, he and along with a few other sport media people in our program went to the Ryerson men's baseball team's games and filmed them, and then edited together highlight reels. Drew, what was that sort of process like, and what was coming up with that idea like for you? And how did you adapt over time to the constant changes that you faced throughout the season?
Well, like you said, there wasn't really a blueprint. It was kind of we had to figure everything out on our own. There was lots of improvements. The first few were very, very rough, mostly because we knew it wasn't going to be overly clean. There's no press boxes. There's nowhere to set up any of your cables or wires. So everything was batteries and SD cards, the Zoom recorders for audio, and just recording onto SD cards for video. But it's tough because we only had access to the very minimal level first year stuff equipment wise. So we had cameras, the AC90s, which are not meant to shoot outdoors necessarily, not meant to shoot over 100 feet away. And we had one in center field, 400 feet away. The conditions weren't overly great. We didn't have any way to elevate our commentators or anything. Didn't have a way to have our commentators close to home plate. So they were way out in center field trying to tell whether it was a curveball or a slider from a bad angle, and people in your way. And there was problems, but we got really lucky with Sean Addis being the social media coordinator and just a really key member of everything that Ryerson baseball has become. Sport media graduate, and he's still at Ryerson working on master in sports business, I believe it is. But he was helpful all the way along. He got us in communication with the coach, helped us get permission, helped us get permission from Brian Withers and the EDC, and everything we needed to get the thumbs up to do it. And then when we had that, like I said, it started rough, but we had about a team of 10 of us. And some people that came out like almost every single game. Bowen was the first guy that comes to mind. He delayed a flight this year so that he could make it to a Ryerson baseball game. So wow. All sorts of dedication. But yeah, we had an AC-90 camera shooting from first base, one shooting from third base, one from center field that we tried to focus, but not the greatest shot. And then the commentators out in center, trying to call the best game they could as our loose structure.
So do you think that you'll be continuing this in the future? Do you think this is sort of a one semester thing? I know there were a couple guys, I believe Kyle Watson was the one who was really pushing for this around trying to do it for soccer as well, or putting broadcasts on for soccer. And now with COVID, that's not really possible, but I believe they were starting to look into doing it as an actual aspect of the course. So have you heard anything on that front? And if you have, what is the sort of reception been like to you changing or creating this new aspect of Rams Live?
Well, the biggest problem is how it works with the Zero remote broadcasting is to send all the signals back to the Rams Live studio. It's done over the internet, and these fields we play at are in the middle of, they're in parks, but they don't have the infrastructure to have internet, especially not internet that we can send hundreds of gigabytes of data back and forth across. So baseball, it's looking unlikely at this point, but I know Kyle was talking with Ryan Sykes, Brian Withers, and trying to make it work. And I think there's a chance because they play at like much more of a legitimate facility.
Right there at Downsview Field,
yeah.
I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's somewhere that you can maybe, run cables far enough to get to somewhere you can get legitimate internet that you can run off of. So, I think they've got a chance to do something. The OUA has already canceled baseball for the fall. So we are planning on, if we couldn't do live broadcasts, at least kind of running back what we did this year. With a few improvements, better tech, sound, field mixers, a few improvements. But yeah, they might play in the spring or they might just wait till next fall. So we just kind of have to wait and see.
What was your favorite part about doing those broadcasts? Was it just the fact that, you guys are working as a team and trying to do something new? Or did you get a chance to do some play-by-play or color? Or was it just like the whole aspect of, trying to create something new for the program, I guess?
I got a chance to kind of do a little bit of everything. Color and play-by-play I did more towards the end of the year because the crew got shorter and shorter as the year went on. But there's this really great moment where Ryerson was playing. First of all, they had all their playoffs on Thanksgiving weekends, and there was awful thunderstorms and rain. And their first game was supposed to be at 8 a.m. It ended up starting at 6 p.m. Long delays, sitting in Ajax. End of the day, whatever, it comes to it. Ryerson's 1-1 in the group stage. They need to win this game. And it starts at, I think it starts at 9:30 p.m. or something, super late. Me and Jackson were calling that game. And Ryerson upset Guelph, who was thinking maybe Guelph was going to end up winning the whole thing. Ryerson upsets them. It's super exciting. The players are all losing their minds because coming into this year, Ryerson had never won a playoff game.
Wow.
So not only did they win a playoff game, they beat Brock. Now they beat Guelph, and they had to hope that they had the run differential as a 2-1 team to make it. So then we drove over because our game started at 9. 10 minutes away, the game that started at 9:30 was the game that would determine the run differential. So we get in our cars, we drive over, all the players drive over, and then they're all standing watching this game finish. And Brock scores a run off of Waterloo that breaks the run differential, clinches it. Ryerson are on the side of the field, like behind the dugout, just yelling and screaming and celebrating because they're moving on to the next day. And it was like 10:30 after he'd been sitting out there for 12 hours already. Like, it was a mess of a day.
Jeez,
but
wow.
that was by far the best moment of the whole year.
Did you get that on
crazy.
film?
I think Sean has a video of it. There's a picture where it's the whole team like smiling, and Liam Crothers is right in the middle of it because he had worked his way in there somehow. But yeah, really cool moment.
Oh,
So-
that's awesome. All works out at the end.
Yeah. So obviously, we're running out of time on the Zoom call, but Spencer
What's new?
Snow is in our program. He was in our program. He switched out between fall and winter semester second year. Did that sort of relationship with a student on the team help a lot? Or do you think that was sort of, okay, like at least we know somebody? Or was it sort of the relationship with, as you mentioned, Sean Addis and the coach that helped more than knowing Spencer?
No, it was definitely helpful. There was a few times that I'd reach out to Spencer for stuff like asking about practices, or even before we got in contact with Sean Addis, Spencer was one of the first people I reached out to. Like, hey, do you think this would fly? Do you think the coach would be down for this? Do you think the players would mind? Do you think this is possible? And we got positive responses, and yeah, it was cool. There's a clip where Spencer made a diving catch against U of T, and after the game, it was a doubleheader. So between the games, he walked over and he's like, "You better have gotten that." So we cut it and we sent him the clip. So that was kind of funny. But yeah, no, of course, it was very important and valuable, I'd say.
That's pretty cool. We'll dive into more of the stuff you've done outside of that sort of Ryerson thing, but I want to wrap it up with one question around the baseball. And it's probably something you could see coming. What is the biggest thing that you learned from that experience? Like, maybe if you can't think of one, what are like your top 3 takeaways from doing something that you've never done before, and something that I assume you thought was possible, but nobody had ever tried it before, and obviously it required a lot of work. So yeah, like for somebody who's looking at potentially getting involved, what would you say is the biggest thing that you learned?
Biggest takeaway is that producing is hard. Because biggest example, we got there we got there 4 hours early on our first game because we're like, okay, we need to figure this out. First thing is, where are the chairs? It's like, oh, okay, all right. So we drive over the Canadian Tire, completely forgot to get chairs for the commentators. So we got like these basic little folding chairs, whatever. Didn't think about getting a table, so scorecards were done on their laps. Then 2 weeks later, we had this game where it was rain delay. They continued playing later, but all of our stat sheets, roster cards, scorecards, all drenched, not waterproof at all. Didn't think, no umbrellas packed, didn't bring any ponchos. We were worried about the cameras and stuff out in the rain, and then there was the worrying about scheduling stuff, getting people to help, finding people that want to go to Ajax for 8 hours on their Saturday and hold a camera, stuff like that. Like all those elements of producing are a lot harder than just executing the game itself. It's all the prep, the lead up, the planning, whole lot goes into all of that.
I think,
right.
Learning on the fly, right? That's maybe the best way to learn a new thing as well. So I think the fact that you guys had to, adjust to different circumstances may have, been beneficial to you in the end and made you learn a lot more than what you might have anticipated. So no, it's a really cool thing that you guys did. And yeah, shout out to you, Drew, for putting that together.
Appreciate it. We have one more thing coming from that, actually, because we recorded live radio calls at every game that we went to. And we haven't had a chance because there's just been other stuff to put them out. But starting next week, I'm going to be making podcast versions of every game and then re-releasing like the season in order from where we picked up to the last 10 games through playoffs of of their season. So stay tuned for that.
All right. If you need any help with that, feel free to hit me up. I have Pro Tools if that helps at all. So
Ooh.
there's that. But yeah, I guess before we wrap, one final question because we do have 4 minutes left. Will this be your practicum? Because we obviously have to start thinking about it, considering it's like a year away at this point. Have you just sort of decided on whether or not you'll make this into something that could potentially benefit you in terms of your academic potential? And for the people who want to get involved at Ryerson, do you offer creative practice hours?
Yeah. There's creative practice hours. First off, that's the easy one. It's just forms that I got to fill out, but we log like who's at what game, who's doing what. If anyone needs creative practice hours, please reach out, because people to help with audio and cameras, if we ever do get back to it, I guess in 2021, that'd be appreciated. And yeah, I've thought about it for practicum. There's a couple different figures in the OUA baseball community. One of the guys, Canadian baseball guru, very huge in the scene. He's actually organized a couple tournaments partnering with other people. So I was thinking if maybe we could like cover a tournament, that would be like an interesting practicum project. But yeah, that's down the line. We'll worry about that one, but it's definitely on the table, we'll say.
All right. And after the break, we'll get into more of his different projects, including the Virtual Jays Network, which he did with Jackson Farrell, which we mentioned in Jackson's episode, Crunch Time, which he's been a part of, and everything else that he's done. So we'll be right back.
It's okay, Connor.
Side DVD. Yo, just now, multiple Blue Jays players and staff have tested positive for COVID.
The pitcher had it last week, so.
This is Shy DVD. Let's see.
Good thing Gibby got out of there. Gibby's like 70.
Yeah. Oh my.
That's true.
Do you want to just continue this? Because this is like breaking news, you know? You want to just keep going?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. Yeah, so we were going to dive a bit more into Drew's stuff, but we're just going to mention this breaking news. We'll get into it in a bit. But yeah, multiple Jays players and staff have apparently tested positive, according to Shai Davidi. We'll be following this pretty closely. We'll probably hit this after our next break, just so we can get a bit more information if it comes out. But yeah, let's hard pivot back to Drew, because that's sort of who we're here to see. And this time his camera is working. If it cuts out at any point, we apologize. It's sort of out of everyone's control at this point. But yeah, you might just get a hilarious face from Drew where he's just looking stupid for 40 minutes, and that's on the internet forever. So
Hopefully not.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mentioned before the break that you were Virtual Jays Network. You were a big part of that. So let's dive into that a bit more, because Jackson was obviously more of a play-by-play aspect of it. You were more behind the scenes. So what was that sort of behind the scenes working with sort of the game footage, audio, play-by-play audio? What was that like?
So because it's over the internet, we had lots of problems. It's a whole lot easier when you're sitting right across from someone to call a game. Bad delay. Also, MLB, we since it was through the video game, it goes so fast. The pitchers, they're automatically set. They go. Like, there's no breaks. So when we try to have color and play-by-play, there's a lot of jumping all over each other, trying to get a quick hit in, and then something happens, play-by-play jumps over to color. So we didn't think it would be a clean enough product to do it live. So we pre-recorded all of our games, and then I went in and cleaned up all of the audio through the 3-hour game every single day. So that's why we only made it through 45 games, because we got to a point where I was like, I can't do this. There was 2 all-nighters in there, plus a 5 a.m. sleep. That just like it got to a point where I was like, this is
That's
not
crazy.
worth it anymore.
And then you have to export all of that and upload it to YouTube on top of that. That is a process.
And stream on Twitch and watch the Twitch chat.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I thought exporting this audio and uploading it was a long process, but that is crazy. I can't believe you did that. Jeez.
Yeah, I've got a decent graphics card at least. I built a PC a couple of years ago, so the video was okay to export, but it's like 3 hours to upload to YouTube every day that you have to like and because it's all on my internet, because you can't share that like feasibly, like because I'd have like there's no way to get that to help spread out on his internet as well. So I'd have the 3 hours of YouTube uploads. Oh, it froze again. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
It's okay.
So it was the 3 hours of YouTube uploads had to be done before the Twitch stream because my upload can't handle both. So it was like it had to be done days in advance if possible. It got to being too much, but it was fun while it lasted. And like we got Chase Anderson retweeted us on Twitter,
That's cool.
Anthony K on Twitch. Like there was a couple, a little bit of interaction. Andrew Stoughton from The Athletic followed us on Twitter. So
Huh.
yeah, it was pretty rewarding. But yeah, for a two-man effort between me and Jackson, I feel like it worked out pretty well.
Would you consider starting it back up?
I want to move into doing the Ryerson thing, and
Yeah.
we're working on. I'm working on a website behind the scenes that we're hoping to launch before the end of summer. So there's a few things going on, but I mean, there's a chance. Like we enjoyed it, and it's kind of like the baseball that we did for Ryerson. The more you do something, the more you realize, hey, we can be doing this better and improving on the fly, like you kind of mentioned. So next year, I mean, after how the owners and players acted this year, if we have a lockout with the CBA next year, I mean, maybe we'll bring it back for 2021, but we'll see.
Yeah, and maybe a bigger team as well. If you want some help, Connor and I can help you edit some stuff for that.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, so yeah. Yeah, no, seriously, that was a really cool project. I told Jackson last week, it's really cool. Doing that and coming up with that idea was really unique. And I was telling him that Sportsnet could put it on TV and it would be, a hit, get a lot of views and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, appreciate it.
So I guess, what do you think sort of, I don't know if it went wrong is the right term for it, or maybe made it too difficult? What do you think sort of was the big reason behind that? Do you think you needed a bigger crew? Do you think it was just too much for you to handle? Was it just too complicated? What do you think sort of went wrong with the Virtual Jays Network?
Yeah, we didn't really have enough time planning it out, I'd say, like considering the actual workload of it, because I think I pitched them the idea on like March 23rd or something, when the season started on the 26th. Like we only had a couple days to turn it around. And it's just because it was my PS4, so I had to tape it. And then I had to, there was some stuff that'd be done to make it usable for the stream. So we wanted to have breaks so that we would have time to mentally prepare, fill in our scorecards before we go to the next inning. And also just like, if you're watching, you don't want to hear, and he hauls it in and that'll do it for the third. Welcome to the top of the fourth, stepping in like when you need a break. So I had to edit in ads between every half inning, then render that, then upload that for Jackson to call with me, call the game, get his audio, edit it again to put the audio in, clean up the audio, and export it for a second time every game. But I didn't think about that. And I also didn't think about if it's on my PS4, he doesn't have access to stats, which means all the standings updates on social media, all our schedule, that has to be done by me. And just because of not thinking ahead of what it'll have to be, kind of left it a little too much for me to be able to handle.
Yeah, that sounds like a ridiculous amount of work. But no, you did a very good job, posting that stuff on social media, the starting lineups, etc. Yeah, it was cool. Yeah, go ahead, Connor.
I was just going to ask, could you have done it through PlayStation Share? So I don't know if Jackson has a PlayStation or not, but you
He's
could
an
potentially.
Xbox guy.
Oh, you're Xbox?
Yeah.
That's a problem. Okay, yeah, I guess that's an issue. Because you can stream directly from your Xbox to the Twitch, right?
Yeah, and through my PlayStation as well. Like it's
Okay.
built in, but to add the layer of recording it pre-taped, like it gets a little messy there.
Huh. Okay, so I guess you weren't doing it through PlayStation, which eliminates that potential, negating that hurdle, I guess.
Yeah, because and that's the reason it had to be done with me, because I think he's got a 360 or something, and
Okay.
I had the PS4, which meant, well, it's just on me. But well, it wasn't the end of the world. It just I'd say the idea ran its course as well, because we called up Nate Pearson. We had that. We had opening day hype. The Jays like aren't a playoff team, so they wouldn't really be in the playoff race if we played the whole year. It's like what was left? You know what I mean? Like what was there left to do? So
Yeah. And they got off to a really good start too during your
yeah.
simulation, right? So I guess things were looking positive, but yeah, it's hard to do an entire 162 game season plus playoffs, all-star game. If you were to do that, your home run derby, that would have been interesting. Yeah, it's tough, but shout out to you guys for sticking with it for what, 45 games it was?
Geez, yeah,
Around
in
that?
the 40s. It was in the 40s for sure. We got about around the quarter mark, but I'm not sure exactly where.
Nice.
Yeah, I know Jackson mentioned on his podcast that you guys did create sort of a bit of a following. So how did that sort of go for you? Like, obviously you haven't really done something where you've created, I guess, a massive following, maybe with the Ryerson baseball thing you have, but up until Virtual Jays Network, this was sort of a first for you. So what was that experience like, trying to build a brand from scratch?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'd never streamed on Twitch before, and Twitch is really interesting to me, and that's something that, depending on how long we're locked up, it might be something I want to try and get into in a different way, because I think it's such an interesting platform. So we kind of knew that in order to do anything, but no one really watches MLB, by the way. There's like, the top streams usually have like 200 to 300 viewers, which is a good number. Like, we'd be satisfied with that, but it doesn't compare to a lot of the bigger Twitch games. Like, there's
FIFA,
probably around like
Warzone.
200 games that are more popular than MLB right now. So
yeah,
we're expecting to have around 10 viewers, and that's about what we got. Our opening stream, I think we peaked around 90, and that was our most for a while. But then when we decided that we kind of were running out of energy and we wanted to go with a bang, was when we called up Nate Pearson, and we just promoted the hell out of that game all over Reddit, all over our social media, just whatever we could do. We ended up having, we peaked at 160 viewers at one point,
nice.
which ENHL topped that because they had a nice brand going for themselves with their graphics and such. But it was cool. The coolest part about developing the following was when we got big enough, and I'm not sure what the threshold was. I think it might have been like 200 followers or something. When we put out stories that mentioned the players, it actually like notified them. So
that's cool.
we got story views from Grichuk, Shaw, Austin Meadows, Luis Arias, like all. I think we got like 8 or 9 story views on Instagram. That was kind of cool, from like the actual verified players.
That's cool.
Nice.
Did you get any sort of feedback from them?
No, I mean the Chase Anderson retweet and the Anthony K follow were the only two real interactions, if you'd even call it that, but nothing other than that.
Did you use Anthony K after he followed you?
We reached out to him on Twitter. I was like, hey, was there any chance you'd want to come into our booth for a game and either be an interviewer or something? And
cool.
there's a guy in his chat that said he was K's brother, which I believe, but I'm not sure, and said he would try to ask him, but it didn't work out.
That would be cool if he did like the play-by-play for a game that he was pitching.
Yeah.
Like walking through like, okay, what am I thinking here? I go, okay, why is he throwing a curveball? He should be throwing a fastball. Stuff like that.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Huh. So I guess we could sort of move on from the Virtual Jays Network, because we have hit it pretty hard with you, and we've hit it pretty hard with Jackson as well. So if you want to get more of an idea of what the play-by-play was like, go back and listen to the Jackson Farrow episode we did. But let's dive into your, I guess, work you've done with Crunch Time, because that's sort of something that's gained a lot of following among our sport media community, especially our program. And I think it's something that's been really cool. And Aiden's been on it, which was pretty cool to see. And a lot of our friends are the guys who are the main people on it. So how did sort of crunch time come about, and how did you get involved with it?
Well, the producer is Seth Nevsky, and I mentioned before, I've got a bit of a history with him playing on my baseball team. Really great guy, super funny, hilarious. He does stand up. Like, the guy's absolutely hilarious. He reached out to me and he said, I've got this idea. I want to have a couple of attacks. I want to have an overall 10-minute show for YouTube. I want to have short rants we can put on social media. I want to have a series where you have a reigning champion and you can get you can get like social growth. People promote it. You have different guests. You I was like, man, this sounds like a great idea. So I joined on as just the editor and like graphics type guy. So Seth was kind of the brain power behind it all. He came up with pretty much all the prompts and all the questions and came up with the spin-offs. There's a overtime spin-off where it's a one-on-one. There's a draft time spin-off where it's like a rounds of drafts. So he just had a great idea, and I was able to jump on. And yeah, so for the past couple of months I was working on that.
And you mentioned that you are now leaving, I believe. I think you said Maddie was now going to take over as editor. So I guess what was that sort of experience over watching that sort of brand adapt as not necessarily a producer, as you were with the Virtual Jays Network and with the Ryerson Baseball, sort of taking a bit of a backseat to that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's like I kind of mentioned at the end of the Ryerson Baseball segment, like, producing is a lot. You know what I mean? Like, it's nice when someone else is, when I can just bank on Seth. Like, if I have something that I have to make a decision, I can just bug him. Hey, you decide this. Yeah. And one of the big reasons I also did it was because I wanted to learn Premiere and After Effects more. So just doing the editing allowed him to have all of the creative vision, overall control of that, and let me kind of focus on, okay, how do I mask this layer and how am I doing that? So it definitely, Seth's role was really carrying it, and he continues to. As you mentioned, I'm just going to try and transition more into working on that Ryerson Baseball podcast idea. So Maddie's coming on. I think she's going to give editing a shot, and if that works out, it'll be her and Seth and Liam hosting as a strong trio.
Nice. Yeah, seriously, crunch time. I think that's, the sport media highlight of the summer so far, or it's not even summer. Well, it is summer now, but I guess of the spring, right? That was, everybody's promoting that thing, and you got a bunch of followers on there, and tons of comments you guys get too, because the contestants, right, they posted on their stories and so on, so all of their friends go on to your account to vote. So it's a genius idea by Seth and yourself to do that. You mentioned the masking thing. I'm kind of curious. What did you have to mask?
So we've got a wipe effect. And if you want to see it, something I want to mention before we move on is, if anyone is listening and they've seen the Instagram or anything like that, definitely check out the YouTube. And the YouTube, the link is in almost every single post. It's on the Instagram. It's on the Twitter. The YouTube is where we have a full 10-minute video every week. And Liam has funny little quips built in there as the host, and Seth builds these funny boards, and there's like a real production that ties everything together nicely. If you haven't had a chance, recommend checking it out. But for stuff like that, we have a wipe that there's like transparency and that kind of stuff all built into it.
We'll link to it below our podcast, our YouTube video, and we'll also link to it below the Spotify. Potentially, I don't know if that's possible.
No, we can't. On YouTube, we will. No,
okay, we'll link to it on YouTube. All right, so we'll link to it on YouTube. We'll also link to his Ryerson Rams stuff, hopefully, and potentially, if he wants us to, we can link to the Virtual Jays Network YouTube videos, because you've obviously done a ton.
I'll put a bunch of things in the description for you.
All of your stuff will be in the description. Let's put it that way. I'm making Aiden do extra work this week.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't hit in terms of projects you've done outside of Ryerson that we should get into? Because you've done a lot, and frankly, I've lost track of everything you've done.
No, I think that pretty much covers it all. The other big focus has been doing Rams Live, because I was hoping that this year I'd be able to be a BCL and trying to work towards that position. But other than that, that's pretty much covering all the bases. I'm doing a podcast with Seth Nevsky. We've mentioned him 6 times now. It's called Outside Baseball, where you're, I believe, 4 episodes deep right now. And we've got a couple more coming before we get into, hopefully, baseball season. Just called Outside Baseball, where the premise is Seth hasn't followed baseball since 2016. So we're kind of working on catching him up on all the stuff he's missed.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That sounds really cool. So yeah, go check that out. Where will that be? Like YouTube, Spotify? You have any
Spotify for
platforms?
sure.
Yeah.
100% on Spotify. Might be elsewhere. But we'll say Spotify to be safe.
We'll try to get Seth on maybe in a couple weeks once you've sort of started that up. We can start linking that to everything, and hopefully that happens. But yeah, I think you guys are doing something really cool, especially you and using your relationships that you have with Seth and Thomas to your advantage, and that sort of trust that you already have with each other. I think that's huge in sport media, having trust in each other to try to create this content. But yeah, I think it's really cool what you guys are doing with Crunch Time, with everything that you've done. A lot of respect for that. And you put in a lot of work. I don't think people quite realize just how much work it takes to do this kind of stuff. So yeah, mad respect to you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Do we have anything else we want to ask Drew before we move on to the actual sports? Because we've just talked about Drew. This is definitely the most we've done about a single person, because he's done the most stuff out of everyone we've had on so far. But there's a lot of sports we need to hit as well. Yeah. So anything you need to add in?
I don't know. I think we've, learned a lot about Drew, and he's talked a lot about, what he's been doing. So I think we've hit kind of all aspects of that. We can move on to some sports. I know, Drew's big MLB fan. You guys already know from listening already. So, MLB season starting up again. We got some NHL news, a couple minor things. So yeah, we'll go to sports. That's all I wanted to say.
Perfect.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so sorry to cut you off, but we're going to do MLB after this call ends, because there's a lot we need to get into, and I think having a full 40-minute-ish window with Drew will help a lot, because he knows it way better than I do, and you two can have a great conversation about it. You mentioned before the podcast you're not a big basketball guy, so we'll just sort of fire through that really quickly. There's a few guys who've opted out of the tournament so far. Davis Bertans, who plays for the Washington Wizards, has opted out because in the past he's had ACL issues and he's had injury issues in the past, and he's going into free agency. So he is backing out. He was the first player to do it that I saw. Trevor Ariza is also opting out. He plays for the Portland Trail Blazers. He wants to have a visitation with his son. So he's decided to do that instead of go to the tournament, which fair. I don't think anyone really has an issue with that. And another player who's opted out is Avery Bradley, which was kind of surprising.
That was yesterday, right? That came out yesterday?
This came out yesterday as of recording. He opted out because his oldest son, who's 6, has a history of struggling to recover from respiratory illnesses. So he chose to opt out because his son likely would not have been able to go. And honestly, I don't blame him in the slightest. I think all those reasons are very fair. I understand all of them, and I think we'll see more of that as we continue on getting closer to this tournament and closer to teams continuing to report, which we've already done. But on other news, there's a couple of signings. Taylor Ziller, who has now signed with the Spurs, is a center forward combo. He'll play for them for the rest of the season, and he's a non-guaranteed option for next season. So that might be another center on the Spurs to watch out for, especially with the LaMarcus Aldridge drama about whether or not they're going to trade him. That'll be really interesting to see what happens this offseason. So that's, again, something to watch. And finally, Toronto Raptors. We mentioned on the last podcast that they were going to go to Fort Myers, I believe. Naples. They were going to go to Naples. Yeah. And they've decided against that now. They're going to go to Fort Myers and train there until the bubble opens, which is very soon. So we'll see what happens. There was some baseball news before, as we mentioned, with some of the Jays getting it, and it's sort of blowing up in baseball, kind of, with more and more teams having cases. So we'll see what happens. You look at the Orlando Pride, who I guess I'll mention as one little soccer thing because it's insane. Orlando Pride playing the NWSL. They have players like Alex Morgan and Marta, who is a big Brazilian star. They had to pull out of the NWSL's tournament, which starts this weekend. So it'll be the first major North American sports league to come back. They've had to pull out because 6 of their players and 4 of their staff have tested positive for coronavirus.
Wow.
So it's happening, people. People are getting sick. We'll dive into whether or not we think that they should play these tournaments later, because I think that could be a really interesting conversation. But enough about baseball. Drew, do you have anything you want to say about basketball? And we'll move on to hockey, I guess.
I mean, the one thing is, if you look at the numbers in Florida, the top 6 since it started, the top 6 days for most new cases of COVID are the past 6 days. It's been just spiking there. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, man. It's for the NBA to be there and the MLS to be there, and the Jays might be there because they might not be able to play in Toronto. There's a rumor they might be in Tropicana Field. Not trying to bring this back to baseball, but just the state of Florida as a whole, dangerous spot to be right now.
Yeah, they had a massive spike today where I think it was like 5,500, 5,600, which just smashed their previous high. So they're exploding in cases, and that's going to be something to watch, as you mentioned. Let's get into something a little bit more positive, because this is going to be a pretty both positive and negative podcast, as it's sort of been with sports over the last few weeks. I guess we'll do this really quickly. As you might know or may not know if you listen to our radio show, we're both big fan. Well, Aiden and I are both big fans of Steve Dangle, and he had a kid on Monday. So congratulations to him. If you want to check out his sort of video on it, you can go and check out his YouTube channel. It's just Steve Dangle. Congrats to him. He kept that hidden really, really well. Almost leaked by Justin Bourne.
He kept it hidden so well that the title of his video was secretive.
Yeah.
Because it didn't even say, like, I had a kid or something. It says first overall picks. So, okay, funny story, actually. Last night, I'm just bored on my phone. It's like, I don't know, maybe 11:30 at night. And I'm just scrolling on YouTube. And I'm kind of like falling asleep too. And I just click on the video for I don't know what reason. And I watch like 3 seconds of it and I back out. And if I stayed for like 5 more seconds, he would have said, like, he would have pulled up the kid. But I was just like so like out of it. And then I waited till the next morning. And then I get a Snapchat from Connor saying that Dangle had a kid. And then I go back to the video and watch the rest of it.
It's a cute video. It's well done.
Yeah,
it's
he's
a very good
really,
video.
really good on YouTube. He's someone who I think a lot of us look up to as a content creator.
Yeah. Ryerson. Shout out Ryerson.
Shout out
Radio,
Ryerson.
RTA.
Yeah. But yeah, after that little tidbit, his favorite city has some news around it, with the hub cities continuing to adapt and more information coming about potential hub cities in the NHL. They've stated that there are 6 options still left in Toronto, Vancouver, Edmonton, Vegas, Chicago, and Los Angeles, which, okay. Don't know about the last 2, but I think those are sort of afterthoughts. But yeah, there was some more news around that. Vancouver had some news come out today from Elliot Friedman saying that there is potential that there might be a snag in the Vancouver bid, and the NHL and Vancouver may not be able to work through that. So that's an option. Yeah, there was just a lot of stuff in terms of the hub cities. Vegas still appears to be a favorite. Their bubble sounds like it's going to be the most airtight of the 6 cities. So I feel like it's probably a guarantee at this point that Vegas will be one of them, as we mentioned a couple weeks ago. But who knows? Something could change. Vancouver appeared to be another favorite, but that may have hit a snag. Edmonton their premier, Jason Kenney, released a video on Twitter. Drew, I don't know if you saw that. Did you?
No, I didn't.
He released a video trying to promo his Edmonton city as being a hub city for the NHL.
Wow.
One problem with the video, it didn't feature Edmonton once.
Really? Was it just shots of, or what was in the video?
It was just shots of like the national parks
Huh.
the entire time. It was hysterical. He was just getting roasted for it on Twitter.
Yeah, that's
it was
tough.
really. I recommend checking it out. It was really funny. So he did that. I don't know how that slipped through the cracks that they didn't show Edmonton once.
Yeah, even a shot of the arena or something you'd think would be a gimme.
Yeah, it was a little weird, but he's pushing for it really hard. I think Edmonton wants it pretty bad, so we'll see if they get it.
They've been good with COVID cases, right? Alberta as a whole.
Yeah.
Alberta's been pretty good. So is BC.
Yeah.
They have had a bit of an issue in terms of their retirement homes, but it's not really an issue for NHL players. Ontario's been okay. Like, we're getting pretty good in cases, especially when you consider what Nevada and Florida and Arizona are all going through right now. So it might end up being that we have 2 hub cities in Canada, which I think would be really cool. Before I tell you about the proposed Toronto plan, Drew, I want to get your thoughts on which cities you think should be hub cities. Of the 6 that I mentioned, who do you think should end up being the 2, I don't know if you can call them lucky, but 2 areas where NHL players are forced to go and play hockey?
Okay. Well, first off, I was thinking that it really didn't matter. And my first thought was, I don't care, because if fans can't go, even if Toronto's in the mention, like, does it really make a difference if there's all these stars in Toronto and there's going to be no fans? You're not going to be able to see anything. There's no events. Does it matter if it's here? But then it was one of you two, I can't remember who it was, on the podcast. You said how cool it'd be if they play that Ryerson. And I was like, oh man, you've won me over. I really want to see that happen. So personal preference. I mean, it would be awesome if it was Toronto. It'd be cool if it was Vancouver with the Olympic Village. I don't know enough to say about most of the U.S. city-specific locations. I think it would make sense, though, logically, to just have both in one country. Because then if there's changes, federal, states of emergency, you're set. Like, you don't have to worry about one shifting and the other one not, or something like this. One closures, like if all of a sudden there's closures of, it's out of control in one of the 2 countries and restrictions are made. Now what? I think it would probably make more sense to me if they just double down and pick either both in the States, both in Canada. And looking at overall numbers and the federal approaches, I think they're probably better off both in Canada. I don't know if there's bias in that, but looking at the numbers, I think that's fair to say. But obviously there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. Like you said, complications with Vancouver, and I mean, can't really speak on any of that.
I think like Connor said earlier, I think Vegas is a pretty good bet, but I do know that the NHL is looking at having both in the same country. And also I think that's also beneficial because if you want to do the Stanley Cup final, then there's no traveling in between countries. So it'll be easier during that time, whenever that is, in September or something. I know it's a later problem, but yeah, there could be some procedures implemented, like Drew mentioned. I still think Toronto is a good place. Give
them the X.
Yeah, go exactly. Yeah, I think Toronto's good. I've mentioned it on previous podcasts, my reasoning for that. And yeah, I think, that thing with Vancouver is kind of iffy now. I'm not sure if they've maybe put themselves out of the running. I think it's just between Toronto, Edmonton, and Vegas. And yeah, like Connor said earlier, Chicago and LA, I think those are just like throw-ins. I don't think that they're actually considering doing it, especially in LA.
Yeah, a lot going on in LA right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the reasons they had the 2 American cities, I think, is in case something changes with the Canadian government, because obviously we still have the quarantine. And I think Chicago is sort of a backup. I think the way that sort of the rankings are going right now, it's like Vegas Vancouver, Edmonton are really close. Toronto, Chicago, LA is sort of what I've gotten from the reading about it and the different LeBron articles, because he's been really on this stuff. Friedman's been pretty on it as well. So we'll see what happens. This Vancouver stuff only broke this morning, earlier today. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm not sure if this is potentially a deal breaker, but we'll see. I think after the break, we'll dive into the Toronto Hub City plan, because I want to get your sort of takes, because a lot of it broke. Well, I guess most of the plan broke in terms of what was available, and we only have 3 minutes left on this call. So after this break, we're going to dive into the Toronto Hub Cities, and then we're going to hit the massive MLB news that's broken today and over the last few days. So we'll be right back. All right, so Toronto Maple Leafs, Toronto as a hub city. That is being thrown around a lot recently, as plans have continued to adapt and as different things have come out around potential plans and what players are getting and all that stuff. So let's dive into just what the Toronto's proposed plan is. So there isn't a lot that we know about it. We know a few things, but the biggest things that we do know are that they'll likely just have exhibition plays completely to themselves. It'll be players only, everything. They'd have access to the Raptors training facility or the OVO Center. I believe, it's the OVO Center, correct?
Yeah.
All
Used to be the BioSteel Center, I think.
Yeah. So OVO Center, they'll have access to the Ricoh Coliseum, or I guess not Ricoh Coliseum anymore, Coca-Cola Arena, I think. So they'll have access to that.
Coca-Cola Coliseum, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is.
It is? Oh, they
Something
didn't change
like
Coliseum.
that.
Okay.
Coke got it.
Coca-Cola something. They'll have access to BMO Field, which I think would be cool, as well as a ton of other built/setup amenities. I don't know what that necessarily would be. It would be really cool if they maybe gave them beach access, because obviously the exhibition place is right by the beach. That might be a bit too far for them to go, but who knows? I think that could be really cool. But yeah, other than that, Vancouver, as I mentioned, Vegas and Edmonton still appear to be ahead. But what do you guys think about the proposed Toronto Hub City plan? Do you like what they're doing? Do you think they're doing enough? Do you think there's not enough being done? Where do you sort of stand on the number of amenities that these players are getting?
I mean, I think it's a lot, if they have access to all these facilities and they're all bunched together. It's not, too much walking. It's walking distance, right, from each facility to the other. I think, one of my main concerns is, transportation to a place like Scotiabank Arena or to Mattamy. That might be a bit of a problem with Toronto, because those bigger facilities are kind of more spread out in some way. And also, do we know where these guys are going to be like living? And are they?
There's a hotel. Hotels? There is a hotel, one hotel which is literally Drew could probably throw a baseball from the hotel to BMO Field. It's that close.
Okay.
It's less than a minute walk. It's across the street from all those sort of where they do all those. What do they call them? I'm blanking. The giant rooms. This is really bad.
Stay with it.
Enercare Center. Is it Enercare Center?
Oh, Enercare. Yeah.
Enercare stuff. It's across the street from that. It's that new building. If you've been down into Exhibition Place.
So it's just one hotel that they're going to have?
I think I saw 400 rooms in a tweet.
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
Rooms.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so that makes me feel a little bit better then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a solid proposal. And I think just the transportation to Scotiabank kind of worries me a little bit. Maybe I would prefer having maybe two hotels, one closer there and then one closer to Rica or Coca-Cola Coliseum. That might be better, but I guess we'll find out.
Has it been confirmed that they're going to use Scotiabank? Because they could very easily use Ricoh.
Yeah, I don't think they need to. That's what I was going to say. If you only have you have around 24 teams, so 12 of the venue, right? And you
Yeah.
don't play every day. And for TV wise, they need all the ratings they can get. They're not going to overlap games. So if you just have back-to-back games, you're not going to play more than 3 in a day at a venue, and then 3 in your West Coast venue after that. Like, do you need more than one rink? I guess for training you would.
The issue is for the ice, because games are pretty heavy on the ice, so it may need time to recover.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's something that we have to pay attention to, whether or not they choose Scotiabank. Or that's why we sort of chose Toronto, because they do have multiple arenas that have broadcasting capabilities.
What about an outdoor rink at BMO Field?
July?
In July.
I love it.
I was going to say, how you're going to kill players. Imagine how hot they're going to get.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, you're right.
They will die from heat stroke or
I don't know.
Dehydration.
Just came to my mind. I thought I'd say it.
The reflection off the ice when you're driving by on the Gardner just
would be interesting.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if it's necessarily possible. If it were basketball, sure. Just I don't know about hockey and all the equipment, and how do you keep the ice frozen as well?
Yeah,
you probably need multiple ice surfaces for training purposes, right? Like practices and all that. Like you'd probably have to have a couple. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's what they use Rico for. They used Rico as a practice rink.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of options with Toronto. I think Toronto's a good spot to potentially have games. I do want to get your thoughts on something though that's sort of been controversial, I guess, in sort of the sports sphere about, especially hockey, home field advantage or home ice advantage. Because obviously there may be a bit of an advantage in terms of if you have the Leafs playing in Toronto. Do you guys think that's an actual issue? Or do you think that's something that people are overhyping and that really isn't a problem? Like, where do you sort of stand on that issue?
I think, it could give the Leafs a slight advantage. I wouldn't say it's going to give them like a game-changing advantage. But, they're used to playing there. They have some of their practices. Their morning skates are always on Scotiabank. But the thing is, they might not even play at Scotiabank. They could play at Coca-Cola anyways. But if it was Scotiabank, I honestly don't think that there's going to be a big or any home ice advantage whatsoever, especially because there's no fans. Do you mean in terms of like the arena or in terms of the city? Like being around like your fans and stuff?
It's just sort of been everything. Like people have wondered how much of an impact playing in your home city is going to have, and potentially your home arena.
I think also just because like you're used to everything and it's not too much of a change. You're playing there throughout an 82 game season normally, and you're used to like, I guess, the weather and the facilities around you, and where everything is. I guess, for players coming in, it might take them some time to adjust to it. But I don't think it's going to be a game-changing advantage, like I said.
I actually don't think it'll be tangible. Like, I don't think there'll be any advantage at all, because if they're in the bubble, like they're away from home, like they're still living out of a hotel room, like they're still not able to go to places they know. Like it would feel almost like a road game, because you're living in a hotel. It wouldn't feel the same as like a true home ice. And you'd have games from the visitors locker room and that type of stuff as well. So I don't think there's really anything. I saw one person, and I think it was just a random dude, like it wasn't anyone reporter or relevant, suggesting like you have the East Coast teams playing in Edmonton and the West Coast teams playing in Toronto, but then like time zone wise, you'd have to have the games at, like, it just wouldn't make any sense, because you still want the games playing on TV at prime time in their fans market. So I'd say it's probably negligible.
I have seen that thrown out a bunch. I do think the time zone issue is a thing. Even people are going to try to bump over that, but like that is a big change. If you've ever traveled between time zones, you know that, especially 2-3 hours if you're doing Vegas and Toronto. But maybe they find a solution. I think it actually is a bit of an advantage because you're used to playing on the ice, especially in hockey. Ice in each arena is different, especially when you like one of the biggest problems with the Leafs playoff series last year against Boston was the TD Garden ice was just terrible. And Boston's a little bit more used to playing with that, and Toronto's a bit more used to playing with the Scotiabank ice. Maybe if you play somewhere like we keep throwing this out in our very biased opinions, Mattamy, some ice that these guys probably haven't played on. Maybe that's a solution. They also have 4 locker rooms, so you could theoretically socially distance. They got the broadcasting facilities in-house. The only problem is just getting up to it. You'd have to probably just not allow foot traffic between the entrances for X amount of time. And I don't know how you let staff in or out of the Mattamy, how that would work. But I like the Mattamy as an option. I think in our very biased opinions, it could work really well. And Sportsnet and TSN both have experience broadcasting at a Mattamy. So that wouldn't be that big of an issue. It's just, would the NHL want to do it?
I think it's...
Sorry, go ahead.
So no, finish your point.
I was just going to say, I think it'd be really cool to see the Leafs back in Maple Leaf Gardens.
Yeah. I'm thinking like it would probably be possible to just shut the block on Carleton from Church to Yonge, because you can reroute the streetcars down Yonge, and they do that sometimes. And you like the businesses would have to be compensated or whatever. There's like 10, 15 businesses. You can just shut the subway entrance on one side so people have to exit through Yonge. And then you just screen people coming in and out of that street. And it'd probably be a mess on Yonge Street, like to have people turn in and be forced to turn around. But like you could realistically do that because you just have that front entrance and you could just get the players in that block. And then that's where a second smaller bubble would be. Like it could make sense.
I like that idea. It might be a little complicated, as you mentioned, traffic wise, but the city's already crap in terms of traffic and construction. So it wouldn't be out of the question. Like maybe I kind of like that. And you were talking about the issue of getting to the arenas, I think with a bus, it's fine. Like it's not that big a deal. You have a few buses that are just completely sterilized, like top to bottom. No issue. You have a wall between the driver and the players. Problem solved.
And soccer teams are doing it already, right?
Yeah, exactly. You got teams in Europe and Germany and England watching the game right now on the other screen because Liverpool are close to winning the league. And
they haven't won it yet? I thought they already won it.
They haven't won it yet. They're 20 points up. So odds are they're going to win it, but they haven't officially clinched. They could still technically fall apart. But right now they're up 1-0 on Crystal Palace. So maybe today. Who knows? It will be really – they play City next week, who are second. So that could be really cool to see them end against City, try to clinch a league against them. But
good story there.
Yeah, great soccer stuff that both of you care lots about. I'm going to stop shutting out my MLS podcast from now on because I've done that way too much already. So, other than that, in terms of hockey, there's not much other news.
Should we talk about Austin Matthews at all?
We should talk about that, shouldn't we? I forgot to add that to the show notes. Yeah. Where do you guys stand on that? For those of you who aren't familiar, Austin Matthews was leaked / reported by Steve Simmons that Matthews had tested positive for COVID-19. Frederick Anderson was living with him. He moved out of Matthews' place and tested negative. Where do you stand on that? Do you think players should have that medical information released by reporters, or do you think that they should have full control over whether or not that goes public?
No, I think that, the players, they should have the control, and the media needs to respect their privacy. I don't really agree with what that guy did, the reporter did. I guess, just in terms of Matthews having it, and like he probably does have it, even though it's not never going to get confirmed, I guess. It's I don't know. It's a tough feeling, as a Leafs fan, knowing that one of the best players on your team has it. But yeah, not much we can do about it. Just wishing Austin Matthews the best. But yeah, I guess just going back to that whole Steve Simmons thing, I don't know. I just don't agree with that at all.
And there's a reason that the team hasn't released a statement yet. Like
Yeah.
there's a reason that it's just come from one source, and everyone else is kind of left it at that. So yeah, I don't know. I think like with the Jays, when the player broke, it was just a pitcher has contracted COVID, and it was like if they said a Leafs forward, maybe that's, I don't know, but I think it's a little much to be naming names, I guess, unless you have like a Djokovic type situation.
Yeah, which we'll get into that in a second. But I'm torn on the subject because on one hand, you have Matthews who, yes, it is his private medical information, but what's the realistic difference between finding out he has COVID and finding out he's broken his leg or he has a concussion or a separated shoulder?
I think
Right?
it's because no one's dying from breaking your leg. It'd be the same way,
That's
like
true.
I guess another example is if Steve Simmons said that Matthews has cancer, like that's not anybody's business to be releasing that. You know what I mean?
And I think also just because there's no other player that we know of in the NHL. So like, why
Yeah.
do you have to release it if it's Austin Matthews? I know it's Toronto and it's like everyone wants to get their news out the quickest, right? But I think at some point you just have to look at, and look at respecting the other person's privacy, and he might not want this information out there. So I mean, there's two sides to it. Like you can look at it in different ways, but in my opinion, I don't agree with it. I would rather, have that information kept private. If I was Matthews, especially, I don't want really people knowing that because he might not want that. I'm sure he would come out with a statement if he did have it potentially, but and if it wasn't released. So yeah.
Yeah, you have swayed me. I think it is interesting. And Drew, you mentioned cancer, and that sort of tipped my head because positive news: Oscar Lindblom on the Flyers. He
Yep.
practiced with
Yeah.
them. I believe it was yesterday. So it's looking like he might be back for the playoffs. So it's amazing to hear after his diagnosis and going through. I'm not sure if it was chemotherapy or radiation, but good for him. Happy he's back.
For sure.
Anytime you see that a player comes back, whether it be Brian Boyle or Phil Kessel or Jason Blake, Oscar Lindblom, it's positive to see. So wishing him all the best. We'll see if the Flyers get kind of the first play-in round, but maybe he'll help them. But yeah, let's hit some of the more minor stories quickly. We'll start off with NFL. Aiden, I'm sure you know a bit more about this, so please divert all of your knowledge
Sure.
into this podcast.
Yeah. I'm thinking of doing an entire podcast actually on my other one about this topic, the Lions, because, the Lions, they don't get any media coverage. So you know what? We have to do our job here on the big league to shout out the Detroit Lions, to give them some respect. And I respect them for doing, well, actually, no, this is a tough news that broke yesterday. Because their owner, Martha Firestone Ford, stepped down. She's over 90 years old already. She's been at it for a long time, and she's handing the owner title to her daughter, actually, Shyla Ford. So from what I've heard about her so far, she's similar to her mother, but she wants to be a bit more involved in analytics and getting to know the players a lot more. She also said that she would be open to bringing in Colin Kaepernick if the coaches and GM decided that they wanted to bring him in. She also supports players kneeling as well. Yeah, I mean, I don't really think there's going to be too much change for the Lions. I know that, a bunch of Lions fans have been saying that the Ford family should just sell. But in my opinion, I think that if they sell, then there might be a chance that the Lions get relocated if someone else buys them. And I don't really want that. I think, they have a good fan base in Detroit and, it's close to here and I don't want to see that happen. So I'm kind of nervous about if someone else were to take over. But I mean, like the owner position doesn't really decide on the players or anything, so I don't think it's going to change like the way that they play. But yeah, it's just some NFL news that we haven't really gotten much of recently. So, and it's Lions news, so we have to touch on it.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's just positive to hear positive news, especially coming out of the NFL. And sounds like maybe Colin Kaepernick's getting close to potentially
It
being
does,
actually
yeah.
considered by teams, and maybe he gets signed. I'd love to see that. I think that'd be a great first step in terms of the NFL rectifying their old mistakes and massive problems around what they've said and what they've done. So we'll see if that happens. Another group, I guess, or organization that's sort of trying to rectify their issues with racism over the recent years is NASCAR. NASCAR has been very vocal about their support for Black Lives Matter, and one of their drivers, Bubba Wallace, who's a black man. And look, I think what they've done so far is pretty positive, but the most recent story wasn't so positive. They were racing at Talladega, I believe, in Alabama, and his team reportedly found a noose in his driver's garage pit area. It was very serious, and everybody sort of freaked out a little bit. The FBI was called in to investigate, and they ended up finding out that this had been put up back in, I believe, early fall. So it was good that it wasn't necessarily aimed at Bubba, because he has had to go through a lot recently. Social media backlash around what he had to go through, or not what he had to go through, what he claimed was a little harsh in terms of last night. Bubba Smollett was trending, which I think is incredibly messed up and just completely ignores the fact that he actually found it. It just wasn't racially motivated. And I don't understand why you would use a noose to tie to your garage door. That seems really odd to me. I feel like there are a lot of better knots that you could tie that do the exact same job. But here we are. Bubba Wallace has done an incredible job in terms of fighting racism in NASCAR. It was a really, really special show of support by the drivers when they pushed Bubba Wallace's car to the front of the field. And he got out, hugged a bunch of them, and was crying. And that was really positive to see, because the NASCAR communities really showed their support for him. And I think it's a massive positive in the US, because NASCAR has largely been seen for a long time as one of the more racist sports on the planet. You know, they're up until like 3 weeks ago, you were allowed to fly the Confederate flag.
Yeah.
And it's just embarrassing at this point. And now that they're sort of cracking down on it, it's good. We'll see if that actually works. But look, there's progress being made, and I think that's what we can really look at. Obviously, not enough progress has been made in terms of certain police justice and police reform, specifically looking at Breonna Taylor and continued treatment of people of color in the U.S. and in Canada. But we're all trying to listen. We're all trying to understand just what these people have to go through on a daily basis and how we can change. And with the continued support and this support that I saw on social media surrounding Bubba Wallace, it sort of added some hope to something that sort of made me feel a little hopeless in terms of our society getting a bit more equal and sort of evening out on just how everything is in society. But yeah, onto a bit more of a lighter topic, unless either of you have anything you want to add to that. Feel free to speak up.
Yeah, I just want to say quickly that I feel like NASCAR, the organization, has done well recently with tackling issues like you mentioned, the throw investigation here, taking action against the Confederate flag, and losing some. They lost a racer, losing some, I'm sure, of their fans for taking that stance. Even if you look back, I think it was about 2 or 3 months ago, early on in quarantine, when there was the racial slur in the iRacing stream by one of the racers. If you remember the incident I was talking about, they took action quickly there as well. So you mentioned earlier, it's a sport and kind of a fan base that might not be associated with being the most progressive or the most accepting. But I think it's nice to see how the league has, or the organization, I guess is probably the proper term, has taken action and dealt with these issues.
Yeah, I agree. It's, it's a step forward. And I think, because there's no sports right now, NASCAR is kind of like on a big stage in the sports world. So doing these positive actions, makes it stand out even more. So I like what they're doing, with the flag and now with what you see with Bubba Wallace, the support that he's getting. It's a huge step in the right direction. And it's definitely drawing a lot of eyes to it. So, it's a good time for NASCAR, and it's a good step in the right direction.
It's just positive to see change. And you want to see, as Adam Wilde points out on the Steve Dangle podcast, you want to see receipts. And NASCAR starting to create a couple of receipts. And hopefully the rest of society is as well, but we'll see. We're in the middle of a completely new transformation of society, so hopefully it improves. I guess from one negative to a negative for a single person, but kind of hysterical, even though it probably shouldn't be saying this for everybody else. Novak Djokovic tested positive for COVID-19. As I saw on social media, and as I'm sure you guys saw on social media, people were using or transforming his name into Novak's Djokovic. A little bit of name, if you're not aware. Novak Djokovic is an anti-vaxxer. And obviously he held this charity tennis tournament, I guess this past weekend or last week, which didn't feature any social distancing or anything like that. One other tennis player tested positive, and now Djokovic has tested positive. So if you're trying to get away with sports or society going back to normal, folks, there's your reason why it shouldn't. So hopefully Djokovic gets better, even though it is very ironic that he would get it. So next thing you know, we're going to have Aubrey Huff getting it, and we're not going to get into that situation just yet. But yeah, other than Djokovic, we're going to touch on video games. So we're going to take a quick little break again, and then we'll dive into the baseball stuff because we only have 8 minutes, and I don't think we can do both video games and baseball in the span of 8 minutes. But video games, Mixer. If you're not familiar with what Mixer is, it's a video game streaming platform that sort of rivals Twitch. It was Microsoft created it to try to rival Amazon's Twitch, which obviously, and they'd recently brought in some massive name talent. They brought over Ninja, if you're familiar with him, Tyler Ninja Blevins. They spent reportedly like $70 million just to get him on the platform, plus multiple tens of millions to keep him on the platform for a set amount of time in the contract. They also brought over Shroud, who's another huge streamer. So they were really, really, really heavy into the paying contracts for streaming talent, and now they have gone under. Well, I guess not necessarily gone under because they didn't necessarily go under, but they've now closed down the streaming platform, which notable to see because it sort of leaves YouTube gaming / YouTube streaming, YouTube Live, Twitch, and Facebook Live as the only real video game streaming platforms left. Mixer did partner with Facebook Live in their shutting down, and they offered to move all of their current streamers who are on contract over to Facebook for a similar fee. So we'll see how many do that. We've already seen Shroud, I believe, go back to Twitch. Drew, I believe you mentioned that, correct?
As far as I know, but not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure he's already streamed though.
Yeah, so you can obviously see people are going back. I didn't put this in the notes. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but how much did you mention the buyouts were, Drew?
So it's not publicly known, but the one leak was that Ninja is being paid around $30 million a year just because Microsoft has the money to do stuff like that, and he's got the name brand appeal. But because they folded, they had to buy out the rest of his contracts. They're paying this year, next year. I think it was 3 years on top of what he'd already been paid. So there was some serious cash going out to those streamers.
Ninja, let's put it this way. Ninja had a good week.
Yeah.
I think we can leave it at that. But yeah, do you guys have anything to add to this whole Mixer situation? Because this was a site that was really starting to compete with Twitch.
I don't really have much to say. I don't really know too much about Mixer, to be honest. Yeah, Twitch is the big dog, I guess, in streaming. So I haven't heard too much about Mixer actually before this whole news broke. I knew that like it was a thing, but I never really went on it. And yeah, it's interesting to hear that, it's combined with Facebook now.
Well, and Facebook, I don't see a future for, because like for me and a lot of people, half of Twitch is like there's a culture like Twitch chat, like and that's not something that like people don't, the stuff that's in Twitch chat, you don't want to tie your Facebook profile, your real name, have everyone being able to like click and see your whole life. Like, yeah, I don't get how that would work with no like anonymity. So it struggled out of the gate. I'm not sure if Facebook gaming is going to really go anywhere, but yeah. Do you guys follow like any esports at all?
I do a little bit. I vaguely pay attention to FIFA a tiny bit, and I pay attention a little bit to NHL, as well as vaguely I used to pay attention to Fortnite and Call of Duty, Warzone. I pay attention to a couple of streamers who play competitively to that. Do you, Drew?
Yeah, I try to watch CS:GO now and then because I find it interesting. I've only played like a dozen hours. I don't play it at all, but it's very easy to watch and fun. I follow the Overwatch League pretty closely because that's a game that I've played for a couple of years, and especially now when there's no sports, they've got games in North America and they've got games in Asia happening online. So there's like almost always some kind of content if it's your thing. There's a Toronto team that's getting clapped, but still a Toronto team to cheer for. So it's just kind of interesting, just like filling the quarantine sports itch.
Aiden, do you follow any esports?
Not really. Like occasionally I would go on to watch like an NHL thing. But there's this one guy on YouTube. I don't know if you guys know him, Johnny Superb Man, 2BC Productions, 2BC. And he does a bunch of stuff, on YouTube, but he's also doing Twitch live streams. So I don't watch like the live thing, but he uploads the Twitch onto YouTube after. So I'm watching that. He had one last night. He posted of he's doing like a Seattle expansion draft franchise mode. And he did like the whole playoffs thing. Yesterday he uploaded like the entire playoff run. And I'm pretty sure he was up 3-1 in the Western Conference final against Dallas, and they blew it. They lost 3 in a row, all in overtime.
Oh man!
Yeah,
wow.
So I know, like, and if you know Johnny, he gets pretty upset. I think this one kind of just left him speechless though. So yeah, you'll have to check that out.
Yeah, so you can go check him out. I recommend taking the esports course at Ryerson. Professor Laurel Walzak does that. It's actually pretty interesting. Sort of went into it, not really sure what to expect, but it's actually really good. Highly recommend it. But yeah, we'll jump into baseball a little bit. We might touch a little bit more on esports because I do want to talk to you a bit about that, Drew. But yeah, we'll be right back with either esports or MLB. I haven't decided yet. All right, so I want to talk to Drew. I want to talk to you about a bit about your experiences with Twitch, because we didn't really dive into that very much when we were talking more about you and your experiences with the Virtual Jays Network and all that. So I want to know, what was that experience like? Because I'm someone who's interested in Twitch. I know there are probably lots of people who are interested in Twitch. There are professional sports which are being shown on Twitch. The NWSL, that tournament which I mentioned earlier, all those games in Canada are being streamed on Twitch. NWHL, they're also through Twitch. So what has your experience been through using the platform, and sort of what are the positives and negatives for you?
Well, the first positive is that chat is awesome, and it's something you don't get on TV. And I'm not sure how legally you guys acquire certain streams for watching sports, but there's sometimes you'll have a chat there on certain websites, and it's like full of like people spamming like, "Oh, screw the whatever team or whatever." But on Twitch, it's like you have people watching chat and people from the actual organization. So if whatever the league is, if we're talking about the league, watching chat, and it's like if there's an exciting moment, then like that just adds to it, in my opinion. It's free, which is great for the viewers to be able to hop in, like you watch ads or whatever, donate, but it's free. Like there's no paywall. You don't need some fancy specialty channel to watch leagues that aren't getting shown on Sportsnet, for example. And then as a content creator, I mentioned we used it for Virtual J's Network. And that was kind of tough because it was pre-recorded. So we couldn't be talking to chat during the game in our calls. Like we could type in responses and stuff. But yeah, it's just kind of, it's different than YouTube because it's more intimate, right? Because it's live and you can respond to the viewer can chime in to the streamer, especially on a smaller stream, like a stream just starting up, like you're able to have that kind of relationship, which makes it like a really interesting platform and something that, depending on how long quarantine lasts, something that like I want to try and get into more into as well.
Okay. So yeah, I guess your experiences have been relatively positive, even though it was difficult to do with the Virtual Jays Network.
Yeah, just pre-taping doesn't really work too well for it.
Yeah, I know YouTube does do YouTube Live is an option. I know Steve Dangle's played. We've brought him up a bunch already on this podcast, but he does play some NHL on YouTube sometimes with like Ian Tulloch. Shout out to Ian Tulloch. Go check out the Staffing Graph podcast. Shameless plug.
Nice.
Mikey Stevens, I think, is also involved. James Myrtle has played before. He's played with Adam Wild, Jesse Blake. You know, pretty interesting to watch them do their stuff. Last night, I guess I could mention this, is Faisal Kamisa. He started streaming. He was doing some FIFA last night, playing that late, like midnight, 1 a.m. sort of thing. So it's starting to
Cool.
get adapted by actual like real sport personalities, which I think is really cool. And you having experience in Twitch, I think is really interesting. One final question before we move on to baseball. What sort of suggestions do you have for somebody who's looking to start a Twitch stream? So like, what was your sort of setup process like, and what did you really learn from that experience?
Well, for us, we were following the real schedule, which is big for a streamer. You need to engage your audience on a consistent basis. So if Faisal's streaming at 10 to 1 a.m. Eastern time, and then all of a sudden he has a morning stream where he's streaming at 11 a.m., he's going to see a big dip because people that are on the website or around at that time very different. So if you're trying to get it going, the big things we did was consistent schedule, supplement it with some kind of content, whether you're promoting it on Instagram or your Twitter or a podcast where you shout it out just to generate traffic. Reddit was great for us. Reddit was big for ENHL, I know as well. But really, when you're coming up with an idea, and kind of like how when I was talking about Seth's crunch time idea, he kind of had all the bases covered, like a very thorough plan. If you're trying to create content on Twitch, like I think you really have to try and incorporate the viewer because it is such a unique opportunity to be interacting with chat and doing stuff like that, where if you can really capture that, I think you have the opportunity to do something that you can't really do anywhere else. Same premise with YouTube Live, just being able to live stream. You have so much more power as a creator.
And there isn't a better time to do it right now in the middle of a quarantine pandemic. Everything's crashing and burning, but they can still make content. Yeah, I highly recommend you take the esports course because I think you'd really enjoy it from what I've heard from you talking so far. If you're into video games or interested in streaming, it's actually pretty good. You get to hear from some really interesting people, and yeah.
All right.
Let's finally get into baseball because I know that both you and Aiden have been looking forward to talking about this because, well, baseball's back, kind of, sort of.
It is.
Probably shouldn't. It is, but it shouldn't be. yeah, for those of you who have been living under a rock, legitimately, season's set to restart. There will be 60-game season. They'll be traveling, which I don't know about that one, Chief. But they're traveling to home markets. We'll see if that works. There'll be interesting ramifications around where the Jays can play, whether or not they'll let them come to Toronto, whether or not they'll end up in Buffalo because they got their stadium down there, whether or not they'll end up in Dundee, which that's
Dunedin.
already not ended well. And we haven't even started the season. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens. But let's sort of dive into just sort of the crux of what is happening. So the MLB has announced that they'll be resuming, as I mentioned, with 60 games. Players will report to camps starting on July 1st. They will only play against people in their own conference. So East against East only, and then West against West only. In terms of what that means for the Jays and how games will work, 40 games will be in your division, and 20 games will be not in your division, but against interleague teams. So the Jays are in a little bit of trouble because that means they got to play the Tampa Bay Rays, the Boston Red Sox, the Baltimore Orioles, which that's not really that big of an issue, and the New York Yankees 10 times each. So we'll see how that goes. We may have another low draft pick next year, folks. I don't know whether or not we should be too optimistic about that, but look, baseball is back. I think that's what's really notable here. Other news in terms of it is opening day will be either July 23rd or 24th. So that's sort of unknown at this point. And as I mentioned, the vast majority will be played at home ballparks. And I guess I'll get your thoughts on this before we get into sort of the random rules that have come out because of this and because of the new style format and having to socially distance. So what do you guys think about this current setup in terms of resuming play? I'll start with you, Aiden.
I think, I'm always, first of all, I am very iffy about it. I think I'm iffy about, any league that's returning to play. But like I've said in the past, I don't know if a 60-game schedule is going to be sufficient enough to award a World Series champion, but I guess it's the best that they can do. So I guess I'm okay with it. Baseball is back, so why not? 60 games is okay with me, I guess. The whole East versus East, West versus West, Central versus Central thing, I think that makes sense to do because you're still going to be playing, the teams in your division. But, there's always got to be some interleague play. You can't be playing the same teams the whole season. And I mean, I know Connor said, we might be getting a low draft pick, but, I think that the Jays do have a chance to make a playoff push. I know Drew knows this because we did a podcast for our on-air course, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
And I'm optimistic. I think that they do have a chance to fight for a playoff spot. So I think it could work out for the Jays. I know there's some very tough teams in the NL East as well, being, the Mets and the Nationals, the Braves. So it's going to be a challenge, but I think the Jays could surprise some people. But the big concern is just the travel. They got to play in their home ballpark. So I don't really know how that's going to turn out. And, it's still in question where the Jays are going to play. I think that they're probably going to end up playing in Florida just because, if they play in Toronto, I think that's just going to cause way too many problems, going in between countries, like we kind of mentioned earlier with the NHL. What are your thoughts, Drew?
First off, I think it's good there's baseball. I'm kind of surprised. I wasn't thinking there would be because the owners kind of held all the power, and they've already said that they lose money by playing baseball this year. But they decided ultimately it wasn't worth the massive hit to their PR if they canceled the season, because the amount of fans they would lose if they decide not to play during the pandemic because of money, it would be brutal. So they could have just taken their money, canceled the season, not paid the players, and done that legally. They had the rights. They had negotiated that in March. But I'm glad there's baseball. I think the biggest thing, the best take that I saw anywhere was Ken Rosenthal on the Starkville podcast, which is an athletic The Athletic, one of their baseball podcasts. He said that the problem with this wasn't that the owners or players are being too greedy. The problem was that both sides wanted a win. And the sides weren't looking at it like the NHL. And he explained on the podcast, the NHLPA head, who I don't know the name of, he said, actually, no, it wasn't the head. It was a former NHLPA head that had negotiated out of lockouts before, and Ken Rosenthal talked to. And he said, in certain situations, you have to start the negotiations by saying, we need to get back. It's bigger than money. And in this case, it wasn't. But the CBA for baseball expires after this season, which means both sides wanted momentum moving forward. They wanted to win here so they could carry that into the next CBA. And whether you're pro players, pro owners, you think the owners are the billionaires that should take the cut, or the players are being greedy during the time of pandemic, the fact is both sides are in the wrong here. And it shouldn't have taken this long when all they've been talking about was money. And the health stuff hasn't really changed. The protocols hasn't changed in months and weeks. So it's really disappointing that it took this long. On both sides, it looks bad, but ultimately, it's good there's baseball, and 60 games, you'd hope for more. And if they had kind of gotten to this point earlier, you probably could have seen more. But end of the day, I mean, I'll take 60 plus a full playoff structure over no games, right?
Yeah, it was really notable that they've decided to do the 60 and just push ahead. It was, as you said, it's just a negative PR move for both sides. There were absolutely zero winners in this situation. Maybe the fans, but I'd say it's probably more than likely we're going to see a lockout with that new CBA, because these two sides hate each other more than any other organization hates their employees. It's kind of insane just how deep this goes, but let's ignore that and pretend like they both love each other and dive into some of the rules and some of the changes that have now been made. One of the things is spitting will be prohibited completely. So you won't be able to spit actual spit, tobacco, anything, sunflower seeds, you name it. You can't spit. So I don't know how they're going to enforce that. I don't know how you guys think they're going to enforce that. Do you have any sort of ideas?
I saw the term on Twitter, spit suspensions.
Spit suspensions, yeah.
That's pretty good.
Maybe just ban players from eating sunflower seeds, I guess. There's no sunflower seeds in the dugout. But it's going to be tough because that's a huge part of baseball. So, I don't know, maybe they're going to have to find something else to eat, something else to chew on that they can swallow.
Yeah, I think they get how serious this is, sitting home for long enough. Like, I think you've got to expect by now that every player is mature enough to understand that it's bigger than sunflower seeds, and you've got to just conform to the protocols at this point.
Yep.
Yeah, it's fair to say. Other rule changes that are pretty notable. There's now going to be a universal DH. I think that's interesting because it's protecting the pitchers. Well, their justification for it was that it's protecting the pitchers from being overworked, especially in the NL. But I think it's also notable because it's sort of something that I've wondered why it hasn't existed up until now. Are you guys happy with this change, and do you want it to be permanent moving forward, or do you find this sort of this is kind of changing baseball a little bit?
Well, first of all, I think, safety first, and I think it's a good decision for the MLB to do it this year because of, the workload for the pitchers will be a lot more if they were to hit as well. But to be completely honest, I know there's a lot of people that love this whole universal DH rule. There shouldn't be pitchers batting, but I kind of liked it. I liked having, in the National League, pitchers bat because it adds like a completely different strategy to the game. Because, like, for example, if there's like runners in scoring position and it's a close game and you got your pitcher coming up to bat, but he's having a great game on the mound, do you take him out? Do you put in a pinch hitter? I think that just adds a completely other aspect to baseball that we're not going to get if they do choose to do the universal DH for past this upcoming season. So I'm not too big of a fan on it, to be honest. Um, like moving forward, but I think for this season it does make sense, and I'm okay with that. I know a lot of people really do want the universal DH, and they've been begging for it for years. But in my opinion, I think it just takes away a big part of what the National League had to do and game plan for.
I know one of the reasons they wanted it, the owners wanted it, is because offense goes up when you have a DH because pitchers hit very, very poorly. But they wanted it because of that. I think they're masking it by saying that it's a workload thing, but pitchers don't train to hit. They don't spend effort during the season working on that. And they're throwing 6 or 7 days a week, depending on their program, including some starters who are really the only ones hitting hundreds of pitches in game time scenarios on their arm. Hitting isn't working them at all relative to the strain they're already putting on their arm and they've conditioned to. And it's one of the things that to me just doesn't make a ton of sense in this. Like they got it in right away. And I think it does come down to the fact they want more offense in the game. They want younger people seeing more home runs and just higher scoring games, fewer pitching battles.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I'm in the smallest group of baseball fans, which are AL fans that prefer the DH or that prefer the no DH. Because there's nothing I love more than like 7th and 8th innings and you see a double switch from one manager and then all of a sudden the Cubs have a pitcher in left field. And then I love that so much. And I maybe this is a bit of a hot take. I don't think guys that can't stand at first base and play passable first base need to be in the league as DHs. Like if you can't play a competent first base or a competent left field in front of the monster at Fenway, like do you really need a rule to keep these guys in the league? I don't know about that. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of this.
Interesting. So I guess you're both against it. I should say I'm a much more casual baseball follower than you two, but I kind of like it. I don't really understand why hitters or pitchers hit, although it does allow for the Bartolo Colognes
Yes, sir.
to go viral, and I think that was amazing. But I don't know. I think it's the sort of thing where you have a stance, and some people are a bit more meshed on that stance, and sort of where I am. Like I don't know. It's good for this season. I think it's good for them to try it out to see what happens. This is really a good trial period. I don't really view this as an actual MLB season. I view this as a trial period where they're going to try out a bunch of stuff and just see what sticks.
Yeah. And the one last thing I wanted to add on the DH is I think that's a very clear example of the owners looking for a win, like I was saying before, because this has nothing to do with COVID, really. Like it's just something that they'd been pushed. Like Rob Manfred wanted this, the commissioner of MLB wanted this for some time now, and he's been open about that. And it's just like that shouldn't be what was in negotiations. I don't think when you're talking about getting back to play during a pandemic, it's like there's other issues to be focusing on right now, in my opinion.
I guess same with the next point, the ninth inning starting with a runner on second base. Did that have to be thrown in? I know that's been mentioned in the past and it's been tested in the minor leagues, right? But do we really need that rule? What are your thoughts on that? I think, a lot of games are going to end quicker, right?
Yeah, the reason for that is because there are fewer off days with this compressed schedule. So because of that, it is more taxing if you have to play a 17 inning game, and they don't want to end games in ties. And I think ending games in ties would bother more traditional baseball fans than this proposal, because at least this is balanced. Both teams get the chance with the runner. And while I said that pitchers hitting really doesn't add too much to their plate, if you ask two teams to play 17 innings and then play another 9 innings the next day, that very tangibly does wear players down. And if you're trying to keep everyone healthy and safe, I don't love it for the integrity of tradition and all that, like the gameplay effect, but I don't have any real problems with it being under the circumstances.
Apologies for looking down at my phone, by the way, but we do have some breaking news.
Ooh.
Right now, the Hockey Hall of Fame is announcing its newest class, which I was not
Okay.
aware of what was happening right now. So far, the 5 people that I've seen who are going in, Ken Holland is going in as a builder in that category. Kevin Lowe is going in as well. We have Kim St. Pierre is going in, and the 2 notables. There we go. There's the full list. Chris Johnson just tweeted it out. Ken Holland's going in as a builder. Doug Wilson, Kim St. Pierre, Kevin Lowe, and the 2 notables, Marian Hossa and Jerome McGinley. Going in, both those guys are first ballots.
Nice.
So if you're a Jerome McGinley fan or if you're a Marian Hossa fan, there you go. Those 2 got in first ballot. We might hit that a bit more next week, but this podcast has already dragged on a ton and we still need to finish baseball. So we'll try to wrap up baseball a little bit more quickly just because we have been going for like 2.5 hours. So this will be by far our longest episode. But you just mentioned the runners on second to begin extra innings. Another news, which I guess this isn't really that big a deal. If a game is suspended due to weather, it will be resumed from the time it stopped at a later date. So instead of completely restarting a game if it hasn't gotten the 5th inning, I think. Is it 5th inning?
Yeah, 5th inning is for a game to be decided.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if it, I guess, I don't know. It seems just like.
It's minor. It really, no problems there.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to complain about that. Another one, which I find kind of funny. If a manager or player gets within 6 feet of an ump or other player for the purpose of starting an altercation or argument, they'll immediately be thrown out and face a potential fine and suspension. So there's that.
I could see that happening. I think in the heat
too.
of the moment, like there might be something that happens, and if it's early on in the season, it might be worth a little bit of a suspension. Depends what it is, but I could see it happening.
Yeah, we'll see on that one. I think that's going to be pretty funny to watch. If these managers in this little bit of sense just before they get to the ump manage to stop 6 feet away and start yelling at the guy, I think that could be hysterical. Have an argument 6 feet apart, but yeah, I'm interested to see what the fine and the suspension will be. I think that's going to be pretty crucial to whether or not this is actually enforced. But who knows? It's just another rule. Drew, you got any thoughts on that?
I think it'll definitely be enforced. Anytime umpires have a chance to throw people out of the game, they'll take it. They won't be sitting back on that.
Clearly not a fan of umpires then. All right, so final rule we'll touch on, then we'll get into the COVID stuff because, of course, there's COVID stuff with baseball. Pitchers will be allowed to have a wet rag in their back pocket. This is so that they don't load their fingers and then put those fingers on the baseball because that's just prime way to spread COVID. But before they pitch, and step on the rubber, they must wipe their fingers / hand dry before they can touch the ball. So I guess that's to prevent potential messing with the ball.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much of an impact that has on your ability to pitch. Maybe Drew, I don't know if you know this, Aiden, you know this. You both played baseball till a relatively high age. So maybe dive into what this could mean for the pitchers.
Basically, you can lick your lips now or lick your fingers as long as before you touch the ball, you wipe your hands. Like if your hands are getting dry, you can wet them and wipe them, basically, kind of. Mm-hmm. This is just an alternative to going to your face at all.
Yeah.
All right, so
that's it.
Makes sense then.
If I could add in a couple super quick write-in ones before we go to the COVID stuff.
Go ahead.
2 of the smaller changes is that the owner or the players conceded a couple things to help the owners make some of the money back that's being lost. One of them is one that's less game-changing is the ability to mic up players during certain games, which will be cool and awesome.
That's going to be cool.
And ESPN will probably make some more money off of that. So that's just a way that the players are trying to get more money on the TV deals for the league as like a negotiating tactic.
Mhm.
And then the other one, which more, again, traditional baseball fans not so happy about, they agreed to let owners put ad spaces on jerseys.
Oh, I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know they
Yeah.
agreed to that. Huh.
I didn't know
That's
that either.
really interesting.
So like I think it'll be like kind of the NBA. If you picture where like the Sun Life is on the
Yeah.
Raptors, it's
Mhm.
not changing anything or ruining any jerseys. It's just there.
And they already
It's not
got the new Nike logo on the left side of their jerseys
Yep.
now too.
So you're saying they're not going to look like the European hockey jerseys?
I can't see him going
They
that
better
far
not.
now.
They better not.
Who knows? The way that they negotiated, I wouldn't rule anything out. But here we are. We got 9 minutes left on this call, so we'll see if we can wrap it up. Quickly, I don't really know if we need to add much. Charlie Blackmon tested positive for COVID-19 along with 2 other teammates at Coors Field. So we're already seeing the impact that this is having on the MLB, as well as a bunch of Jays players and staff have tested positive for COVID-19. Rio is not one of them. Daniel Kim, who's a Korean journalist, broke that story. So good news for Jays fans. I will not be surprised to see many, many more cases pop up in baseball, but who knows? We'll see, especially once they start traveling. Do you guys have any sort of thoughts on that before we do our hot takes, which Drew actually prepared 2 of them apparently. So we're just completely unprepared compared to our guest, which is frankly embarrassing. But do you guys have any
Frankly.
thoughts before Drew gives our 2 hot takes?
Well, before we get
yeah,
there,
you go.
just quickly, the Jays shut down their facilities last week on Friday. So
Yeah.
these are kind of cases that have probably been in quarantine since Friday. So hopefully haven't spread too much. Also, the Phillies had a huge outbreak at their facility last week. I believe 7 people in their organization, including staff, tested positive, at least 7. And the Jays and Phillies are right next door to each other. Not literally right next door, but they're spring training neighbors, Dunedin and Clearwater. So I'm not sure if there was any connection there, if that's just an area that's been hit hard. Probably not the teams transferring it to each other, but if that's an area that's under trouble in Florida, then that could be, bad news if the Jays are trying to play there full time.
Yeah, couldn't have said it any better myself. So, hot takes. Drew, do you want to go first or do you want to have one of us go first?
I'll go first because it's fitting. It works.
Right.
So I actually tweeted out last night at DrewFrank20. If Ryu and Gurriel Jr. stay healthy, the Toronto Blue Jays win a 2020 playoff game. Not only make the playoffs, not only make a wild card game, they win a playoff game as long as those 2 pieces stay healthy.
Does that change with the new playoff format?
Yes, it does, because they haven't said what exactly it's going to be, but it's going to be more teams and more opportunities. So I'm going to say the Jays have a chance.
So I assume you mean like the one game that Ryu pitches, they'll win? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. But he also has to be healthy to get us there. If he goes down for a week, like that's probably it for the year. And they have to not trade Giles. I'm not sure if they're going to or not.
So he has to carry them, and then Gurriel just has to stay healthy and do good in the outfield as well.
He's the guy I see as key because there's some depth in the middle infield and some depth on the infield. But if we lose him in the outfield, we're in trouble.
True. You're right. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
That's a good hot take. What's
the second one?
The second one is less positive, is that there will not be a completed round 1 in the NHL playoffs. Maybe they do the play-in game. Maybe they successfully isolate. Maybe they bubble. Maybe they do that top seed qualifying thing. No one's going to finish round 1 because of complications, games in Canada, games in the US, different teams from different places, players a lot from Europe coming in, like all of these factors. I don't think it happens.
Interesting.
Interesting. That's pretty good hot takes.
That was kind of like
really good hot takes.
Connor and I said last week. We don't think that any league is going to be able to finish.
I don't think they even start. I'm saying round 1.
They don't even start. Okay, wow, yeah. All right. That is a big one.
I don't really want to follow that one.
Okay, I can follow it. Mine is like It's not related to COVID at all, or return to play. It's
Nice
NFL.
change.
It's NFL because
All right.
it's kind of hard to come up with a hot take every week and try and top it. So yeah, let's try something different. NFL. I'm gonna do some NFL fantasy football this year. I've never done it, so I've been doing some research on who to take in the draft and stuff. I think that my hot take is Josh Allen and Matthew Stafford both finish in the top 5 for quarterbacks by the end of the 2020-21 season. That's a hot take. That is a hot take because
I'll pretend like I know that's a hot take.
Josh Allen, he's on the Buffalo Bills.
Yep.
Yes,
So
I do know
that's
that.
and they just got Stephon Diggs, so I think that's going to be a big target for him.
Right.
And then Matthew Stafford, obviously being a Detroit Lions fan, a little bit of bias, but he wasn't healthy at all last year. And when he was healthy, he was in MVP caliber form. So if he stays healthy, then I think he could finish in the top 5.
And there's usually 1 or 2 top end quarterbacks that do go down throughout the year. So there could be like a window that gets opened. Maybe.
Exactly. Yeah.
Potentially. Yeah. This have all been good hot takes. I don't know if mine's necessarily that hot, but we're going to video games for this one. I think that's kind of interesting. My hot take is Ninja will not return to Twitch. He will become a YouTube streamer because that relationship that he had with Twitch has deteriorated so much.
Oh,
interesting.
I could be wrong right now because he could be streaming on Twitch and I have no idea. But I've hit and miss on a lot of them so far, so we'll see. Key amongst them being that awful MLB will be the first league to return.
Does that count as reusing the joke if you said hit and miss there instead of swing and miss for the 17th time?
Yeah, exactly right. I was gonna mention it, but I've mentioned it for the 17th time as well, so I didn't want to say it.
Honestly, I just do it subconsciously at this point.
Right, of course.
But yeah, with that, thank you so much for joining us, Drew. This has been a ton of fun. We've really enjoyed it. You know that we both respect you a lot. Like, you put in some really, really good work in the sport media community as sport media students. So yeah, if you ever need any help, feel free to reach us out to us. You want to shout anything out? Like your Twitter, you mentioned you had that, Instagram, Crunch Time. Take the next minute.
Everything will be in the description in case you forget anything.
Yeah, no, I'd say scroll down the description, see if anything interests you. Me and Seth doing baseball podcast is kind of the only thing that we've got big right now. Like I said, the Crunch Time YouTube channel is not getting enough love. Draft Time is the most recent thing they put out. Really entertaining. It's long. It's like a podcast type thing. You've got to have it on and like budget some time for it, but it's entertaining. So I'll say check out Draft Time. It's worth your time. Beautiful editing and overlays by yours truly. But other than that, thank you guys again for inviting me on. You guys have one of the stronger shows I think from like Spirit Live and from now transitioning beyond Spirit Live. So I appreciate the invitation to come, and yeah, it's been fun. So hopefully someone's made it this far in the podcast to hear the sign off. But anyway, thanks guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no
thank
problem.
you.
Anytime.
Very kind words. But with that, thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode with another guest, which we'll figure out in the coming days. So thank you for listening. Check us out on YouTube. As I mentioned, you can follow both Aiden and I on Twitter, Instagram. I'm sure all those are already below. I'm making Aiden do a lot of work this week. But yeah, thank you, and we will see you next week. Peace.